Anthony's going to try and get one more shot off from half court at the buzzer. Oh, he puts it in from half court. Carmelo Anthony knocks it down. Knicks down 3. Should the Bulls foul? No. Anthony for 3. Bang! That one goes down, and the game is tied. In the hands of Anthony. Anthony for 3. Puts it in. Knicks by 1 with 8.2 remaining. Anthony leads in. That shot is good. Carmelo Anthony with the greatest scoring game in Knicks history. He's got 62.
They're going to bring him out now so he can feel the crowd, the love of the crowd for Melo.
Welcome, everybody, into a very special live show here at WFUV Sports, our studios in the beautiful Bronx in New York. I'm Kris Pursiainen, alongside Eli Keeler, here today to discuss the career, the retirement, to say farewell to Carmelo Anthony. And this is someone who Eli and I know well as a superhero of our time growing up, watching basketball as kids, especially in New York City and the surrounding area for, New Jersey.
Close
for
enough.
me. Close enough. Listen, this guy, Carmelo Anthony, is someone who meant a lot to a lot of people. And so that's why we're here today doing a show to say farewell to him, to admire his legacy, not just on the city of New York, but on the game of basketball. Anthony is someone who played 10 years ago very similarly to how a lot of guys are playing now, and still had some of those old vintage elements to his game. I always say someone like Jason Tatum needs to work out with Carmelo Anthony, learn how to get down low in the post, and just the fact that he was the scoring wing of his era. I know Kevin Durant came right after, but Carmelo, 19 seasons in the NBA, Eli, 10-time NBA All-Star. More than half sounds pretty good to me. That's just ludicrous. 6 of those seasons, he was chosen for an All-NBA team. You can go all the way back from his days at Syracuse, winning a national championship, being the most outstanding player of the tournament, to 2021, when the NBA named him one of the 75 best players of all time on their 75th anniversary team. They kept the original 50 from the 50th team. They chose 25 players from the last 25 years to go and add to that list. And Melo made the cut because he was a talent. The Olympics, international Melo, Olympic Melo, as people knew him by. Frustrating for some Knicks fans because they got to see what it was like when Carmelo had other offensive initiators on the court. But for basketball lovers like ourselves, it was just amazing to watch him thrive in that spot-up role, go get someone in ISO if he needed to. Whatever it was, he could do it. And that is how he has played for the U.S. national team 4 times. He won a bronze medal in 2004. He was a gold medalist in 2008, 2012, and 2016, making him one of the most accomplished Olympic basketball players of all time. And as of April 2016, he was the all-time leader for the U.S. Olympic team for points, for rebounds, and for games played. I mean, this is a career, Eli, a storied career. I want to just start by asking you, what will you remember Carmelo Anthony for?
Well, Melo came to the league in 2003, year I was born. I didn't start watching basketball, really get into basketball till years later, probably till I was 7 or 8, conveniently around the time coming towards the Knicks. So what it meant to me was, as soon as I turned on the TV, even though, Knicks, obviously, even with all the ups, obviously came the downs, but having a guy like Melo to come on, just an absolute, offensive juggernaut. To be able to watch him made me appreciate the Knicks and made me appreciate, as you said, the game of basketball to a whole nother level. Seeing someone like Melo who could score from literally anywhere, all the way back to half court, he could score at every level in any way. that even sometimes when the Knicks couldn't succeed as to the level that we'd like to, you could go back and say, the Knicks didn't quite get there, but Melo, man. Every night you could say, wow, but Melo, man, that was beautiful.
I think that sums it up perfectly. And I think that also is what led to a lot of the polarization in the discussions about Carmelo Anthony. I feel like anytime you have an athlete in the New York market where half of their own fans love them like they are a saint, and the other half of their own fans want them shipped out of town on the first flight to wherever.
Yeah.
I think it's a sign that they're doing something right, that they're ruffling the right feathers. I mean, you can look to Eli Manning, Giants fans banding behind him, and another half of the fan base saying, he's average, we need him. And then all of a sudden, he did the winning, and that was that, right? Odell Beckham Jr., you want to stay in MetLife Stadium, someone very polarizing. But none of these guys, to me, were the individual talent that Carmelo Anthony was. And I think when you look back and reflect on his Knick career, that may have been his own downfall, courting the Brooklyn Nets or allowing the Brooklyn Nets to court him, forcing the New York Knicks to trade the assets for him instead of signing for him in free agency, and forever being haunted by the lack of assets and flexibility the Knicks had to build around him. I mean, you want to look back in his career with the Denver Nuggets, 2004 to 2010, every year he played with them, they were in the playoffs. They didn't miss a playoffs. They won 2 divisional titles in that span. And in 2009, Carmelo Anthony led the Denver Nuggets to their first conference finals appearance since 1985. So this is a guy who went to a franchise and helped turn it around. Came to the Knicks, but it wasn't just the number 3 pick in the draft they spent on the superstar, the young superstar at the time still in Anthony. It was their collection of everything. And that, along with, to me, amnestying Chauncey Billups as opposed to Stoudemire, eating the long-term money to rid yourself of the short-term money was foolish, and that just kind of mired Anthony's tenure in New York. I think it resulted in it being incredibly polarizing, and there are lots of moments that we can remember that we'll discuss that were certainly contentious for New York fans. But before we get there, I want to talk about the highs. Right, let's comb through them. Just whatever rises to the top, right? Because for me personally, I had the same feeling. I could flip on the TV. If I was late, he'd have 20. If it was the start of the game, he'd go get 20. Right. And the New York Knicks for the last several seasons, I can think of the young New Yorkers that grow up. Will Randall have a game today? Will Kemba Walker look like Kemba Walker or Kemba Walker? Right. How will this go? How much will Elfrid Payton have the ball? Is Kyle O'Quinn starting again? I just think Carmelo Anthony was this stock you could invest in and just know it wouldn't tank. You knew that was going to pay some sort of dividend at the end of every quarter. And it was to stick with that awful analogy. But just, I think the sturdiness, the reliability, like you said, elbow, jab step, another jab step, a third jab step, pull-up jumper, 2 points. Spin move, get inside, pull up, 2 points. Bully his way to the paint. He had those big pads he wore. Dude. Get down there. He had that old school game. I watched all 30 minutes of Carmelo Anthony's summer workouts with Hakeem Olajuwon. This guy was putting in the work. And while Hakeem Olajuwon's workouts were a little underwhelming, I got to say, teaching him some pretty basic stuff, that's really what was important to Carmelo, was making sure he had the basics down and making sure that what he was doing was the best. Now, you can look to playmaking for others. I think that's a whole debate, right? You can look at his potential assists versus actual assists per game. Oh, the talent around him wasn't great. Like we said earlier, the talent around him not being great, kind of a part of how he landed in New York. So it all wraps into one fantastic debate, in my opinion, where you can just talk forever about who this guy was, what he meant to New York City, but the constant is that he was good. He was really good. That is the bare minimum. And it was so fantastic to have someone down the train ride that I could go see be a superstar. Madison Square Garden, New York City, marquee, Mecca, right? You think of these words like in the 50s and 60s and 70s, the team was on top of the world, and no matter what was going on, Friday night, Madison Square Garden, you had a show to go see because Walt Clyde Frazier was about to put one on. Yeah. And I think that in the modern era, now the Knicks have Jalen Brunson. Yep. They might now have their first player since Carmelo Anthony that's good for a show every night. But at 6'1", much lighter, Brunson doesn't bring the consistency in terms of just a dominant presence on the court, and that to me is special. So what were some of the highs of Anthony's tenure in New York for you? What are some of the moments that you'll always cherish?
I was reminded by this by the intro music for the show, and it's Mike Breen's call, specifically Mike Breen, and I think it's Van Gundy's with him. It's Melo against the Bulls, and this is
Easter Day.
This is my favorite because of how Van Gundy eats his words. Like the second he says it, Melo's dribbling up to where he's about to shoot from, and Breen goes, "Do the Bulls foul?" Van Gundy goes, "Nope," and Melo immediately pulls and hits a three, and it's like, well, maybe we should have fouled there. And then boom, ties it. Obviously, going to overtime, hits clutch three after clutch three. He's just, that game encapsulates like the clutchness, the dominance on offense for Melo. That kind of stuff is just special.
Timeout. They should use it at no, because Carmelo Anthony, when he was coming up on that right wing, he knew what he was looking at.
Oh, yeah.
Food.
Yep.
Barbecue chicken on a platter. Listen, we've got a caller into our show, and it's time to get him through. We've got Ryan Gregware on the line. Ryan, talk to us, man. How are you?
What's going on, guys? Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Well, first time, I will say, I've been a fan of this station for a while now. And, Kris, first off, I love how you don't play revisionist history with bringing up Melo not committing to the Knicks and forcing them to trade assets. I think that's a big thing where you look at the lack of winning that happened with Melo in New York, and that plays a huge role, and you can't not talk about it. But the thing I wanted to ask you guys, very interesting, obviously this is a New York-based station here. Could you make the argument that the Knicks are the third most impactful team Melo played for, with one being Syracuse, or two being Team USA in whatever order, with I believe 3 gold medals, and then 3 being the Knicks? Is that a crazy thing to say?
Ryan, I'm not gonna scream at you for that one. I do think that
yes.
Olympic Melo's legacy is all time. You go and you look at the all time accomplishments for basketball players. It's Bird, it's Taurasi, it's Catchings, it's Anthony. He's right up there with the greats, and we've had some fantastic men's and women's basketball players go worldwide and represent the United States. Carmelo Anthony is at the top of the list of the ones who have best represented the country. And like I said earlier, he's the all-time leader in games played. He's the all-time leader in rebounds. He's the all-time leader in points. His impact on that team was great, and that's why he's got 3 gold medals. For me personally, Syracuse is a different level of competition. And so if you want to say Team USA is number 1, I really will not lose sleep over it.
Either alternative. You can switch either of those, but the Knicks being 3 was the main point I wanted to make.
I would go Knicks number 2 over Syracuse, Ryan, and here's why. That championship was fantastic. I was only 1 year old because Eli said he was born in 03. Listen, I was born in 02. I was just 1 when that championship was won, but as a basketball nerd, I have gone and rewatched that final game, and Carmelo Anthony played like the most outstanding player of the tournament without having seen any of the other games. You just got to give that guy the award. I have to say, though, for someone who we know went on to achieve such incredible things against such a higher level of competition, you almost want to say that you expected Anthony to show out in the tournament. Now, no one should be expecting a tournament win. I think what he did for Syracuse University was fantastic. I know factually, because I have friends from Syracuse, that he is still revered there and up there like as if he played 4 years and won them 4 chips. I got to say, the level of competition would be my personal gripe there. Eli?
I think, honestly, you make a good point, Ryan. I can see where you're coming from. I think the only thing is, I think also, like, the time difference, too. He's able to have a lasting impact on the Knicks because he was there longer. And I think the way, and you make a good point. Kris just said, guys at Syracuse still idolize this guy. You know what I mean? So that's fair, but he's a borderline religious figure, even if that's messed up for Knicks fans. You know what I mean? Like he was everything to Knicks fans, and he was everything to the Knicks for several years, and it's hard to look past that. Coming from a Knicks fan, obviously, but even objectively, if you look at other Knicks fans and say, hear what it means to them, it's hard to look past the meaning, the impact he had on the fans specifically and the city.
All right. Well, listen, I just think, and I'll hang up after this, but I think winning matters at the end of the day, and unfortunately, I don't think he did enough with the Knicks, but his impact on the culture of New York basketball, I think, speaks for itself, so I don't have an issue with, that reasoning there at all.
No, absolutely, Ryan. Thank you for the call. My final note would be, and to back up Eli there, Carmelo Anthony did so much for New York City-based charities and organizations while he was here. He's from Red Hook, Brooklyn, and he did a lot to make sure that kids from that area were given basketball supplies, had fresh courts, new courts to play on, had sneakers. The NBA created a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Social Justice Award, and he was the first ever winner. He's a stand-up guy, and I think he just had more time in New York City than in Syracuse to show that. I know the videos of Carmelo playing with a young Buddy Boeheim have gone viral, and he seemed like a great guy up at Syracuse, but those NBA paychecks hadn't hit yet. Up in the NBA, he had the chance to really make a difference with his community. We're going to go to another caller. Eli, we've got Nick Palmer on the line, so he is going to be calling in, talk about Carmelo Anthony's legacy with us. Nick, do we have you, and how you doing?
Good afternoon, you guys. Loving the show so far. I just wanted to ask a question, shockingly, about Carmelo Anthony. Obviously, he's a 10-time All-Star. He's a scoring champion and a 6-time All-NBA selection. But, of course, he never got to the NBA Finals once. He's the 9th highest scorer of all time, but how much do you think not having appeared in the finals or won a championship impacts his legacy?
If I could go real quick.
Of course.
He was just interviewed a few days ago for his retirement. And if you look in that interview, and obviously anyone can have an opinion on his legacy, but I think a great person to ask is Melo himself about his legacy. And he obviously would love to have been to that stage, to get that trophy, even to make it to the finals, to win a finals. But he made it clear that his legacy is not about just basketball, and it's not about winning a championship. It's about, he talked about how his legacy lives through his son. He talks about how his legacy is how he won at life, how he got out of Red Hook, how he gave back to his community. So even though that probably keeps him up at night once in a while, it's not detrimental to his legacy. He's still an all-time guy, just generally a guy in life, and an all-time Knicks player for sure.
Yeah,
How about on the court, though?
Nick, killing me. Listen, I got to say, despite what Frank Ocean may have to say about Carmelo Anthony's lack of jewelry on his finger, I got to add that just the sheer pressure of playing in New York City, the fact that he's
city-made.
He dealt up against that. He came home. It was a homecoming, and he did an interview recently where he talked about he still watches that "I'm Coming Home" intro video all the time. Me too. And I just got to say that to me, the homecoming of the kid from Brooklyn and him being in New York City, that already is special. And I do think that it sounds a little losery to sit here and be like, oh, well, does winning matter that much? Yeah, I agree with you, Nick. I do think that there are all-time players who get passes for not having won. But I will say, just because not all of them should get quote-unquote passes doesn't mean that greats like Charles Barkley, like Carmelo Anthony, cannot be appreciated decades into the future. I mean, Charles, man, he's still on TV, Chuck, as we know him now from inside the NBA. And I just think that, whether Carmelo Anthony sticks in investing in wine or goes into TV, that he's left a change and an imprint on the game of basketball that's just special. You see New York athletes to this day do the 3 to the dome. I got New York Mets celebrating with the 3 to the dome. I just think that that speaks for itself. When someone is that special, when they can have that impact without having won, that's the pudding right there. You just got to eat it. That's that proof-flavored pudding right there. Thank you, Nick, though, for calling in, and thank you to all of our callers. We're going to get to our next caller. We got my guy Marlo from Queens calling in.
What's up, Marlo?
Lo, can you hear me? What's going on, man?
I can hear you, man. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. It's nice to have you here. Thanks for calling in.
Absolutely, man. I was happy to see the tweet on the timeline, man. I said I had to tap in with you guys. Always love what you're talking about on Twitter. Kris, you pronouncing your last name, it was very helpful. First time I ever got to really hear what it was supposed to sound like. I had my own thing that I had going on for a while.
Don't say it. Don't say it out loud. Your furniture might start floating. You might cast a magic spell by accident.
Yeah, man. But now this is a great topic. New York Knicks lifer, a little older than you guys, so probably a little bit more of a different perspective and purview on the Knicks as a whole. But one thing I really want to point out to the people calling in and the people listening, George Karl put out a tweet the other day, and we know George Karl and Melo have had like a tumultuous relationship.
I was going to say a feisty relationship.
Very much so, very much so. But George Karl pointed out something that I really, really love and I lean into oftentimes, is that only 11% of NBA players and 10% of NBA coaches have ever won a title in history. If you go and look at the list of teams that have won titles in the NBA, it's not equitable. The equity in who has won is predominantly Lakers, Boston, Spurs. It's the usual suspects for the most part. So when we talk about calling somebody a loser or he didn't win anything and things like that, you got to take that with a grain of salt and take a step back. I will also point out that the person that Carmelo was compared to the most, LeBron James, looked at what he had to go and do to get himself a championship. Melo didn't have that opportunity to do what LeBron did to go get a championship by teaming up with two other All-NBA, all-star players year in and year out, and 2 times around. LeBron always needs the most help in the world. And I'm not bashing LeBron, but Carmelo, for the most part, did this on his own. His second-best player in New York on a consistent basis was J.R. Smith. Stat was often hurt. And people seem to forget that. Melo is a top 75 player all time. And New York Nation, Knick Nation, let's get off our high horse a little bit. What is really our lineage? What is the cloth of our organization where we can look at a Carmelo Anthony and say, hey, his numbers shouldn't be retired. He wasn't good enough. Really? I'm confused. This is the Knicks, not the Yankees. And I love the Knicks more than any other my New York teams. But let's take a step back and really look at what it is to be a New York Knick. That meant a lot more in our grandfathers and fathers' days than it has in our day. So for our era, Carmelo Anthony is the Pied Piper. He forced his way here. He wanted to be here. Yeah, he didn't come in free agency because he wanted that extra year of money. He didn't want to give that up. And if Kris, Eli, me, were we in that position, were we going to pass up on that money? I don't know. Maybe not. So we're very judgmental about that, but Melo came here, and the truth is the misstep was not giving away Timothy Mozgov. It wasn't giving away Wilson Chandler. It wasn't giving away Raymond Felton. That's not the issue. The issue was what happened after Melo got here. The amnestying of Stat instead of of Billups instead of you saving that for a Stat.
That's the big one.
Big miss. And then you got Phil Jackson came here and didn't work. He slept. He didn't want to be here in the back half of Melo's tenure here. Phil Jackson punted. He took the money. He traded for Andrea Bargnani. Like, come on. It was organizational malpractice that went on around Carmelo. You don't win a championship by yourself. It just doesn't happen. And people seem to forget this.
Marlo, great call, man. Thank you. I wanted to note that myself about the amnesty because when you talk about the All-NBA teammates that some other superstars have had, well, Carmelo Anthony, I think it's the worst-kept secret in the NBA that Chris Paul was, looking like he was going to be a New York Knick. And it would have been Paul, Anthony, and Stoudemire. That was the dream trio for James Dolan, for Scott Layden, for everything that was going on. And they ate the short-term money and they took it and they said, well, you know what? Actually, we're not going to – we're going to We're going to get rid of it completely. We can't deal with that. That doesn't taste very good. We don't like it. And then they said, oh, but 4 years of Amari, well, we can palate that. That can go down. Well, give me some salad dressing. We'll get that to go down. And what happened was they had tied their entire wagon, not even hitched, tied with a broken rope to the knees of Amari Stoudemire.
Yep.
And frankly,
Well
Amari is someone, and I need to say this as seriously as possible because I really believe it. Amari is someone who is part of the team that opened up this modern era of basketball, the 7 seconds or less Phoenix Suns. Okay? Amari Stoudemire's role in basketball history is important. At that point in his career, it was not.
Yeah.
And so when you get to a point where you are costing yourself opportunities, right? Any finance people listening know about opportunity cost and all of the miry discourse around that, right? The New York Knicks surrendered a lot in exchange for what they could have right away. And it cost them so much for so many years. And you even look to the years following the Jackson tenure. You know, they took years to recover. I would argue that just now, after this past season, we can say that the Knicks are rid of the stench of the losing that happened in the 2010s, the lack of draft picks, the lack of good players, the 17-win rosters, 2 of them. I just think that now it took a 5th seed, second-round appearance to finally rid the franchise. Now they can start fresh. No, they haven't established themselves as winners. They can start fresh, and that is brutal. So I think that when you see Carmelo as someone who came in during that time and helped, I think of the scene from Star Wars with the trash compactor, Carmelo being the big metal pole that stopped everything from completely collapsing. I think that's how you got to see it. I think everything would have been unbelievably terrible. And the reason it was just terrible was because of having a talent like Carmelo Anthony. We've got another caller on the line, Eli. Jack Warner calling into the show. Jack, how are you, man?
What's going on, boys? Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
First of all, I want to say I'm really happy to be calling into something, a special little show like this. And it is incredibly refreshing to see Eli Keeler back in front of a WFUV microphone. So I'm really excited to be calling in. So the thing that I wanted to talk about is kind of twofold. It's more a statement and then a question, because when Nick Palmer called in a few calls ago, he made an interesting point that was what I wanted to talk about, which was obviously the elephant in the room being no finals appearance, no finals title, no rings. First of all, what I think is so unique about Carmelo, and chime in if you whatever you think about this, but one of the things I always found so unique about at least his legacy in New York specifically is that there have been some great players throughout sports history. You can look at basketball, you can look at football, you can look at any sport where they gave the game everything. Statistically, they left it all on whatever playing surface, and still had their lack of rings held against them. I think there comes a point where there's a toxic level of how much people weigh rings into things. Now, I understand that's what they're all shooting for. That's a measure of a team's success. But one of the things I think was so unique about Melo's legacy in New York specifically was how much he impacted that city and how happy people look back on those years despite there being no finals appearance, despite there being no finals win for that matter. And to me, that is what I think is most unique about his time in New York is what he was able to build for himself and what he was able to do for that city, for that team. And they were just grateful for what he was doing without winning a ring.
That's a really good point, Jack. And just as Kris said before, without him, it would have been just catastrophic. With him, it's at least bearable. You get to turn on the TV as a Knicks fan and see good basketball, at least from one of your players, night in and night out. So I agree with you completely. And obviously the championship is what you're going for, but I don't think that's as much of a Melo conversation as it is a Knicks conversation, because Melo's obviously a winner. With Syracuse, he's a winner. He turned the Nuggets from one of the worst teams in the league to a playoff team every year he was there. Obviously, it helped with AI, but you need help. Nobody, very, very, very few people get to a championship and win with zero help. Even Michael Jordan had help, LeBron had help. So I don't think that's I agree with you in the sense that even though the championship wasn't there and you'd love it if it was, we can still look we can look optimistically on it and say, even though with no championship, we got to watch good basketball. He made this city at least happier, not completely hopeless for the years he was there. And for that, I'm incredibly grateful, and I think most Knicks fans are.
Sometimes, Jack, it's not about where the North Star is leading you. It's about the fact that you've got a star to follow. And I think in the sports world, with how valuable hope is in the world of sports, when you had at forward from Syracuse, number 7, Carmelo Anthony starting, you had a shot to win the game. And there are athletes that's true about in every sport, and everyone acknowledges that those are the guys, the dudes, the girls, the women, whether it's college basketball, whether it's pros. There are people who can change a game that is a team sport, and they can do it on their own. And that's very rare. And so I just think at the end of the day, especially when you look at the efficiency he brought to the table, given the volatility of his shot profile, a lot of looks from the perimeter, a lot of looks from 3, still an efficient player. I think he would have been, dominant if teams had the modern analytics they do now to tailor games towards those things. I also understand play style was a thing of concern with Anthony. People wanted him to move the rock more. You got to look at who he had to move it to. As much as I enjoyed Raymond Felton's tenure in New York City, he was no knockdown 3-point shooter. And so it really is a matter of things to weigh. My last note, I would say, Marlo said his best teammate was J.R. Smith in New York. I'm going to go Tyson Chandler.
Okay.
But J.R. next up, and I think that's the discussion right there, and that's your proof pudding right there. Jack, I want to thank you for calling in, though, and spending this time with us.
Thank you so much, Jack.
Thanks to all
Absolutely,
our
boys.
callers.
Thank you for taking it.
Good to hear you.
Have a good one, Jack. And we have another caller on the line,
Let's go.
unsurprisingly, Eli, because Carmelo Anthony, one of the most talked about athletes in New York City history. No surprise that we're ringing in the callers. And we've got Mike Calamari waiting to speak to us right now. So, Mike, it's great to have you on. What's going on?
I mean, guys, it's been an awesome show. First time, long time. So it's great. Get to talk some sports, specifically Carmelo Anthony. Don't really have time to stay on the line that long, so I'm gonna leave you with this question. It's a double-sided question, so I want to hear them. I'm gonna play back the answers, see what you guys have to say about this. My first question is, where does Carmelo Anthony rank in the 2010s New York athletes? So in the decade of 2010s, where does he rank? That's comparing him against Aaron Judge, only his stats in the 2010s, Jacob deGrom with the Mets, Eli Manning. I think there's a really cool question there. Where do you rank Melo among those guys? And then my second question is, where do you rank Carmelo Anthony in all-time Knicks? I'm not sure if that's been asked already. If it has, then no worries about that one. But I'm curious to hear about the all-decade New York athletes and where Melo fits in on this. Great show, guys. Curious to hear what you have to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike, great set of questions. Thanks for calling in. No, we have not been asked either of those.
Those are good questions.
Eli, those are great questions. Do you have any answers ready to go? Because I have an answer ready to go.
Why don't you go first?
All right. So my first answer, all-time Knicks, I'm going to go number 3. That's ambitious. It's ambitious. I think Bernard King is an honorable mention for that top 3, who needs to be honorably mentioned, like required honorable mention, because Bernard King was a guy. But it's Clyde Frazier, number 1. Number 1. You want to talk about winning? You want to talk about all that stuff? Then it's Clyde Frazier. Number 33, Pat Ewing. Number 2. I'm going to put number 7, Carmelo Anthony. Number 3, of course, Clyde Frazier. Number 10. I just think Clyde delivered a championship, and then he did it again. That's number 1 in franchise history. If you want to talk about off the court as well, the fact that he's still calling games for the team, Clyde is not the best Knick of all time. He is the Knick of all time. Patrick Ewing made a finals as an 8 seed. Pretty cool. You got to give him that credit. Maybe maybe kids who just look at Basketball Reference will be like, oh, Ewing was kind of the Jimmy Butler of his time. He brought an 8 seed to the final. I'm going to be like, but regardless, Ewing was fantastic and a dominant center in an era where centers ran everything. Olajuwon, O'Neal, Robinson. You want to start at the start of Ewing's career? Moses Malone still around. I mean, this guy played with some of the best centers of all time. So many of the centers that Ewing played at the same time as are top 20 players of all time. Yeah. And still, Ewing made All-NBA third and second teams in those years because he was just that great of a talent. Now, Carmelo Anthony would go number 3 to me. Again, incredibly talented player. And someone who put it all together. He had the counters for the counters to your counters to his counters. It was 8 steps ahead. You watch Devin Booker now, and to me, that is the only player with a scoring arsenal as meticulously deep and detailed. I mean, Melo had a ludicrously capacious bag, and I think I think that when you take a look at what that actually meant, it wasn't just but the steps and dribbles are cool. It was like, no, he knows how to pick you apart like a surgeon, no matter how you guard him.
Can't guard him.
Because he's good enough to make the shot. And that's what it came down to. So I'm going to go Carmelo Anthony, number 3 for all-time Knicks. Now, for 2010's New York athletes.
This is a tough question.
You got to go winning. You got to go Manning, right?
Yep.
You got to. Got to. I think Lundqvist.
Ooh, that's a good pull.
Is not just a good pull. He is necessary to be on that list. And DeGrom is the other name to me that's like, okay, Judge just in the 2010 to 2020 era, maybe not in my top 3 for the whole decade, right? So I would say Carmelo Anthony would be in my top 3.
I think 3 again, yeah.
And it would in no order would be Manning, Lundqvist, and Anthony. But being a Knick is just different from being a Ranger. And so as much as it breaks my heart to put the King at 3, I'm going to put Carmelo Anthony at 2 for his decade. We talked about off-the-court impact for Clyde. I don't know a kid near me that didn't own a 7 T-shirt. So for me, I'm going to go Anthony at 2 for his decade just because he spent so much of it with the Knicks and did a lot of his Olympic stuff during that decade as well. That was right. Point. So for me, gold medal in 2008, but then also 12 and 16. And 2016 was the year that put him in all those records, and that was really when they utilized him as a spot-up shooter. 2012, he was more of a creator. I think you saw it all from Carmelo, and so I'm going to put him at number 2 because, and I know it's kind of unfair to someone who would be a goaltender, but it's just he was a goaltender, and Anthony had to play the number 1 role and the number 3 role in the Olympics. Like, you saw him do multiple different things. I understand goaltending is really hard. I have to give like 1,000,000 points of credit to Anderson for that 4 or 5 overtime game. But the thing for me is just about the pressure, because the pressure is everything, and pressure creates diamonds. No championship rings were covered in diamonds for Anthony, but I think his legacy was Eli. Those 2 questions, very difficult. I just struggled my way through them. Your answers.
Here's my thing, and I'll say this a lot in a few different conversations. Like, I kind of think about this in the same way when it comes to LeBron and Jordan and that kind of conversation. And I think, okay, LeBron is maybe the best basketball player, and we're not going to get into this because this doesn't go anywhere, but I'll go somewhere after this. LeBron may be the best basketball player ever. Jordan, in my mind, greatest. Yeah, and I think you can kind of translate to the Knicks situation with Melo. Melo might be the best offensive player that the Knicks have ever had. Is he the greatest player? No, because he lacks those. Obviously, at the end of the day, winning is important, and he lacks championships. So I don't think you can put him 1. Like you said, I think Walt is a great option for 1. Ewing, again, I think you could even put Melo as an individual player above Ewing, maybe. But again, the at least appearance in the finals, the appearance in the finals carries a lot, especially as you said during that era when Ewing was put up against all those great centers. But I do think Melo's 3. This next part is tough. Eli Manning has to go 1 because as much as I was a Knicks fan growing up, I was a Giants fan. Eli is my name, Eli Manning.
I was going to say.
I was obsessed with Eli Manning, so I have to go Eli Manning 1, especially because he just willed the Giants. Obviously, ton of defensive help, but he still made unbelievable plays on that offense that that are imprinted in my memory. I will never forget. So it has to be Manning 1. I will put Melo I'll put him 2, but it's tough because there's a difference between greatest and best in my mind. Greatest, in my mind, at least how I associate,
I agree. There's a difference
is more
between
like
greatest
winning,
and
right?
best.
And at least greatest for me is more winning and maybe even more culturally intertwined, and best is more individual player. 2010's Melo could be number 1 when it comes to individually skilled. He could be 1, but again, when it comes to greatest, when it comes to making plays in those moments like Eli Manning did, it's just nobody. You can't touch him there when it comes to 2010's New York athletes. Especially, I don't think Melo can touch him in greatest when it comes to making those big plays in big games, especially because Melo couldn't even get to the big games. Obviously, not all his fault, but it's just kind of how the cookie crumbled.
Yeah, and again, like we said earlier, that's how the cookie crumbled. It may have been Carmelo that dropped it off the roof and caused that cookie to crumble, but how it worked out was, it's what it is. And I think Jack Warner said it really well in his call earlier. The fact that there was no winning, and we're still here talking about it, that's who this guy was. He was a talent. Behind the boards, we've got some special talents as well. We've got Julia Moss, who's been helping us out, and we've got Lou Orlando, our guy behind the board today. Lou wants to chime in here, and I would be remiss if we did not hear from a New York native, so let's do it.
Guys, you've been killing it so far. And yeah, I'm kind of coming from that New York native kind of thing. I'm not really a basketball guy, and I won't lie, I didn't watch a ton of Knicks basketball as Melo was playing.
Don't blame you.
The impact of Carmelo Anthony, not just on me, but on New York City, you can't undersell it at all, man. It's one of those things where it's like, I'm really sad about this, and I kind of said it to you before the show started, this is the last athlete of that wave of 2010s guys. And it's I love nostalgia. I like to get into my feelings and stuff like that. It hurts, man. It's even as not a huge basketball guy, you couldn't go to a dress down day in school and not see a Carmelo Anthony jersey. You knew someone was going to be wearing that. You knew at the lunch table, if people were talking about the Knicks, they were talking about Melo, man. So it's he kind of transcended even that, right, as not a basketball guy. He got to that spot where, in my mind, he's one of the greatest New York athletes we've seen in the last 20 years. I'd even say this. You guys were having that conversation about most talented and whatnot. I think he's the biggest star of the 2010s in terms of star power. And I think really the only person that you could even put into that conversation is Odell. But when you look at how long Melo was here, 2011 to 2017, it's listen, Jeter was a star. He retired in 2014. Rivera retired in 2013. Judge didn't come until 2017. Eli Manning was amazing. I'd put him in terms of greatest above Melo, but in terms of star power, Eli didn't have that star power personality like Melo. So it's Melo, in my eyes, owned the city from the 2010s, man. I want to hear your thoughts on it.
If you've ever seen the video of him in his pearly white bathrobe that in gold has Melo stitched on it at his local bodega buying snacks at about 11 p.m., that is the proof of Lou's statement that Melo ran the city. That guy was the biggest celebrity in the city, and he was in flip-flops and a bathrobe at his local bodega at night because he knew he could walk around like that. He was chill like that. You hear about James Harden in Houston. That's his city. Might see a return even because he loves it so much there. But for Carmelo Anthony, there's nothing like New York City being your city, and Carmelo Anthony was that guy. I have to agree with Lou in regards to the star power. Eli Manning, a lot of his shtick was being removed, being quiet, being goofy behind the scenes. He loved playing pranks on rookies. He loved playing pranks on coaches. He loved playing pranks on everyone, right? But Manning didn't show the media that side of him. The media got we're just trying to get better every day, and it's
Exactly.
about getting 1% better. You come in, you want to get 1% better than when you came in yesterday. And coach talks to us all the time about what it takes to win, and we just want to do what it takes to win. Yeah, all right. Like you get enough of that at a certain point. There was an authenticity that came with Carmelo Anthony as a New York native playing in New York City. There was something so real about it. And as someone active on the Knicks Twitter community, as a Knicks beat reporter, I love hearing from the people I report for, pretty much the people who the content is for, and staying connected with the community. So I'm very still connected in Knicks Twitter, and I have to say that there are people who see Melo in New York City post photos of him all the time. All the time, he just throws
My
up.
friend saw him like a couple weeks ago.
He throws up a peace sign. He poses for the photo. Always there for the fans.
Yep.
And he said recently that he sees Julius Randle and the criticism that he faces, and he thinks, just in the back of his head, he thinks, thank God it's not me anymore. And I got to say, Carmelo, you earned your rest from the New York criticism, the media market criticism, and I hope you really enjoy your retirement. I got to say, he's got his son and Keon coming up, who might just be a hooper. So this might not be the end of the Anthonys in basketball, but Eli, this would not be a Carmelo Anthony show if we didn't ask the question. I'm about to pop the question to you.
Gosh, Kris, here on air?
Do the Knicks retire number 7 forever?
Of course. It's not even a discussion for me. It's not even a debate. Who and we can go back slightly for a second to the greatest of all time for the Knicks conversation and say, okay, Walt, put him above him, even Ewing. How do you, at least in the last, especially 2010s, last 20 years, who can you say is more dominant than Carmelo Anthony? Absolutely no one for the Knicks. He is the most important player for the Knicks in recent history. If you ask anyone in New York City walking down the street, everybody knows who Melo is. Almost everybody will agree. He was the man. Even if the Knicks weren't winning games, we love him. Everybody loves Melo. If you don't retire Melo's number, you could say, okay, win a championship, we'll retire number, something stupid like that, but he made such an impact individually on the culture, on the game, fans, his teammates. I really can't imagine a argument against it.
That means I gotta make it, don't I?
Let's hear it.
Listen,
Let's have fun.
I'm about to give you the list of numbers that the New York Knicks have retired.
I don't know this list, so this is good information.
Number 6, retired across the entire NBA, Bill Russell.
Sure.
Okay. Quentin Grimes might be the last Knick to ever wear number 6. Number 10, Walt Frazier. We know what he did. NBA's top 50, top 75, 2-time champion, 7-time all-defensive first team. Both ends of the court.
Yep.
Number 12, Dick Barnett. 9 seasons with the Knicks, averaged 16 points, 2-time NBA champion. Earl Monroe, 2-time All-Star, 1-time champion with the Knicks, NBA top 50, top 75, 9 seasons with the Knicks. Dick McGuire, 8 seasons with the Knicks, 5-time All-Star, and then he was a head coach of the team for about 20. I was gonna say 21 months, but it might be more than that. It might be 28 months, something like that. Willis Reed, head coach of the team, top 50, top 75, 2-time champ, 2-time Finals MVP. You retire that number. Dave DeBusschere, 2-time champ, top 50, retire that number. Bill Bradley, 2-time champ and was an All-Star. You retire that number. Pat Ewing, top 50, top 75, All-NBA first team, 1-time, Rookie of the Year, 11-time All-Star. You retire.
Oh, then we can talk about Rookie of the Year, too.
You retire that number. Red Holzman, number 613 for the amount of wins he had as a Knicks coach. Head coach of the team twice, 2 different times, general manager in between. And that's it, Eli. That's it. If you have your number retired by the New York Knicks, you were either crucial to the franchise when they won championships, or you really, really made a case on both ends of the court to get up there like Pat Ewing did by making it to the finals, not winning, 11-time All-Star, 1 more than Carmelo, 23 points, 10.5 boards, 3 blocks a game in over 1,000 career games. It's just for 1,000 games for the Knicks in 15 seasons. Yeah, you retire that guy 15 seasons. But for Carmelo, I'm not saying he's not above these guys, but Bernard King, number 30, you can wear it. Julius Randle does. John Starks, not retired. And so when you see guys like Sprewell, who like definitely won't get retired, that's fine. Melo's not there. Houston, probably not, but now he's working with the team as an assistant general manager, yada yada. Maybe sometime down the line they give him a big night to honor him and whatever. Starks, King, Anthony, I think are up there. And if you're going to retire Carmelo Anthony's number and you don't retire Bernard King's, what precedent are you setting? Now, I'm not trying to treat Carmelo Anthony like he's Nick Collison, whose number the Thunder retired because of his contributions and the handshakes he gave people around the building because he was a nice guy. That's not what we're doing here. We're talking about an all-time great basketball player. Right. But I got to say, do you change the precedent that you've set? I know Marlo was talking earlier about how it's the Knicks. They haven't done all this winning. But when they retire numbers, that's what makes it special, is if you do win, you get your number retired. And so one day, will Jalen Brunson's number 11 be hanging up there? Well, if he is on the team when they win a championship, it should be because he was the guy who came and helped turn it around. But if the New York Knicks win a championship when Jalen Brunson's 36 years old and he's averaging 7 claps and 8 daps a game off the end of the bench, I mean, you don't retire that number. And I just think that we're at a point with Carmelo Anthony where the reason we're having this show, the reason we talk about him regardless of the lack of winning, is because of how impactful he was. But the jersey retirement is for the winning players. I gotta say, Ian Begley, friend of the station, has reported that he has support within Madison Square Garden to have his number retired. So we might see it happen. And if it does happen, I would love to be there. I'd love to cover it. I'd love to see him and his family, his son, enjoy that moment. But I do have to say that the team has set a precedent that's a bit different from what he would qualify for.
I think I'll say one thing, and then I think we have a caller. But I see what you're saying, but I think what's important is, and you kind of talked about it a little bit, is circumstance is very important. Brunson doesn't get his number retired if he's averaging 7 claps and they win a championship. Even though Melo didn't win a championship, he was basically the only guy, day in, day out, and he was there. And winning, that's a very good point. But I don't think this necessarily sets a precedent where you have to retire every guy who was pretty good but didn't win. I think Melo was a special type of really good, and there were circumstances, specifically in the front office, coaching, that held him back. That being said, why don't we bring in our next caller, Thomas Aiello, friend of the station. What do you got for us, Thomas?
What's up, guys? First of all,
hey, what's going on?
Weird. What's going on? First of all, it feels very strange now that I've graduated. It's a very weird time. And also that Carmelo Anthony is retiring, I think that's showing, at least to some degree, how old I actually am. But I wanted to bring up...
All right, Gramps.
Oh, Jesus. I just wanted to bring up about Carmelo Anthony. When he was first traded to the Knicks and everyone was going absolutely bonkers about Carmelo Anthony, you have to understand that at that point, since the end of the 01-02 season, when Melo got there, the Knicks were quite terrible. And if you count that period after the 2013 season until the next time the Knicks made the playoffs, that's a 20-something year, I think a 20-year span. And Eli, you had said it, I believe, that people looked at Melo almost as this savior in a way, to kind of play with your words a little bit. Melo, as good as he was, in that period gave Knicks fans the best 3 years of that last 20-so, where it was 2 first-round exits and 1 really good 50-win season. But that sort of goes to show the type of player that Melo was, and everyone always talked about Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, and Tim Duncan was in those conversations. but Carmelo Anthony was right there, and he kind of dragged the Knicks for his entire tenure for a good while, and was pretty damn good at doing it. And it's really sad to see him go out without a ring, but there's no denying, as the 9th all-time leading scorer, that we're going to remember him as this scoring machine that picked the Knicks up a little bit and kind of kicked them in the bottom to get the franchise back to some kind of relevance. And now here they are, I guess, in the aftermath of all of that, sort of avenging the years that the Knicks missed with Carmelo to go to the playoffs, and they're, in a way, making up for lost time. But it's very, very sad and very weird to see him go, and just how times are changing, not only in the NBA, but in people's lives as well.
Absolutely, Thomas. I mean, Lou said it earlier. You talk about the guys from Carmelo's era, LeBron James, Chris Paul, Dwayne Wade, Carmelo Anthony, the Banana Boat crew, right?
The Banana Boat.
And so
I forgot about that.
Yeah, man, the Banana Boat. And to think now that there's just one left in LeBron is very strange. Chris Paul, not done yet, but not the Chris Paul of days past. And, you look at guys, you can talk about Bosh, Bryant, Duncan, Garnett. These guys don't play anymore. And it's just, feels like Carmelo Anthony's retirement is the beginning of the end of an era. I feel like Wade retired, and everyone's like, all right, well, he's still around and going into ownership and different things. But now it's just LeBron. And we knew LeBron would be around forever.
And even he's contemplating retirement, it sounds like.
And he's thinking about it too. So it's the beginning of the end of an era. Thomas, great call. Thank you for tuning in and calling in, man. We appreciate you, as you know, here at the station. And Eli, just as we wrap up here, I wanted to say how special it is that we're able to just have an athlete in New York City media market that we can look back on like this and have debates. I think it speaks to his talent. I think it speaks to his polarity. I think it speaks to it's also him. It's so Carmelo Anthony, and the fact that can be an adjective. He's made such
it's so mellow and it's so Knicks.
He's made such an impact, and he fit like a glove here. So to Carmelo Anthony, thank you. It was our pleasure to watch you crush it along the years, and we wish you the best in your retirement. Eli, any final remarks from you before we get set to wrap up here?
I'll just say thank you, Melo. Thank you for, those nights when I'd come home to school, not want to do my homework, be able to turn the TV on and watch you ball out. You never failed to cheer me up. Even if it was just a regular season game, you just dropped a cool 25. Even if the Knicks lost, just made me feel a little bit better getting to watch you play basketball. So thank you, Melo. I'm forever grateful.
Well, I got to say, that will be it for today's basketball discussion, but that does not mean basketball discussion is stopping here at WFUV Sports. I'm going to need everyone to stay tuned in the coming weeks for an NBA Finals preview show. It's going to be very special. Stay tuned to Pick and Pod, our basketball podcast here at WFUV Sports. And make sure as you enjoy those that in the back of your head, you're thanking Lou Orlando and Julia Moss, our wonderful station manager and station assistant who helped make this show possible and run it today. So thank you very much to Lou. Thank you very much to Julia for helping make these shows happen. For Eli Keeler, my wonderful co-host today on our Carmelo Anthony Farewell Show, I'm Kris Pursiainen, thanking you all for tuning in and saying farewell, Melo.